My name is Amanda Wilkins, and I'm the garden curator here at Juniper Level Botanic Garden. And I wanted to give you guys a quick update on what's going on with salvias. It is a great group of plants, as we have all discussed, and I love Googling the things that I'm talking about just to see what Google pops up. And the first thing that Google popped up was about Salvia divinorum, which is the hallucinogenic salvia from Central America, and how it affects teenagers, because apparently now they're experimenting with that. We don't have any of that in the garden, nor do we intend to. Nope, we just have the pretty lovely garden varieties, no pun intended. And really, like, it's such a diverse group for the garden, you can't not love it or have at least one or two in your garden. So mainly they're from all around the world. There is a salvia for every nation, for every continent, for every sunny spot, shady spot, and something in between. They're very adaptable. They're in the Lamiaceae family, the sage family, or the Lamium family. What makes them kind of different is their floral morphology, and also kind of some squidgy things on the inside. You always know you've got a salvia when you have a square stem and opposite leaves. They're always going to have that, so that kind of helps you out. There are a few things in this, especially in these parking lot berms, is what we call these, that look a lot like salvias, and I always get questions, oh, is this a salvia or is this a salvia? And it's like, does it have a square stem, or does it have an opposite leaf? And usually it's something else. We have a lot of penstemons and veronicas that look a lot like salvias. But for some reason, I think humans, we just love those big spiky flowers, and we pick a lot of plants out that look like that. As you can see, they kind of have what makes things related to each other, taxonomically speaking, is the way that the flowers are shaped. I always tell my students, leaves are misleading. So all of the things in this bouquet are all salvias, including this big fluffy guy. And all of them have different leaf texture. Some of them are really soft, some of them are really fuzzy, some of them are really coarse like sandpaper. And all of these different leaf forms are all related to where the plant is growing, its ecology. Usually things that have very hairy leaves that either grow in a place where it's really dry, and they need to hold all their water in, or they grow in a place where they need to reflect light away. Sometimes they have very smooth leaves, and they use different, they use that kind of smoothness to keep the water in. So they've got it figured out. We're just figuring it out. So salvias in the landscape, like I said, there's a plant for every place, and I wanted to show you guys this little story here. So there are about 900 to 1,000 different species of salvia, and that's just species. And there are a lot of people who argue about what is a salvia. There was a paper that came out a few years ago that said, hey, rosemaries and perovskias, which are two other genera, are salvias, and people went, whoa, 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 what is going on? And I cut a little bit of rosemary. We still call it Rosmarinus officinalis, but if you look at the flower on this guy and look at the flower on that guy, it's really hard to tell them apart. So sometimes there's that like horticultural, taxonomic, botany people argument going on, and it's always just it's a spectrum of discussions on what we're going to call something. If we're going to call it this, we're going to call it that, for the reasons that we choose, and hopefully they're well founded in fact. So we have two salvias here. These are Salvia sylvestris hybrids. They've got a lot of different species on the back ends. A lot of the new varieties that have come out, especially from Walter's Gardens, which we work with, have a lot of different genetics on the back end. So we've even completely knocked off the specific epithet. We just call it salvia, whatever it is. But as the garden curator, it's really important to manage these plants by deadheading them. So some salvias are really prone to making seeds, which can be fun. You know, if you bought something and you wanted that plant, which is a nice, tight, dark pink variety, and then you're growing that and you just let it go and you let it go, and then suddenly you have this guy behind it, you're kind of messing up your aesthetic. So for our collections management, we have to very religiously deadhead things, especially some of these newer guys. But it's also fun to see like how they genetically how they fall back out. So you can definitely see there's some mom and some dad kind of going on right here. There's another species over here that is another super spreader. This is Salvia nutans. I have it in my hair here, but it's also growing all over here. And there's one pretty much in everything that's around here. And so we actually do need to get in here and weed it out. But I love this plant because unlike some of the other salvias, which are very like structural and kind of like shrubs, this has a rosette. And I mean, look at those flowers. I mean, that is just too cool for school. And hummingbird city, like pretty much all of the salvias are going to attract hummingbirds. A lot of them are going to attract bees as well, and the different type of flower shape so is going to dictate what kind of pollinator is going to come to them. So this is one of my favorite Salvia greggii. This is Salvia California Sunset, and because it has a big, large lobe right here, it's actually kind of like a little landing pad for bumblebees. And they kind of squirm up in there and get their little head in there and lick up the pollen or the nectar and probably get some pollen on them as well. And then they go to the next flower and the next flower. Let's see what else I was going to talk about. So management wise, it's important to cut them back and deadhead them if you're not interested in having seedlings. It's also really important, especially for some of these newer varieties that have this more shrubby look and are a little more herbaceous, to cut them back after they finish flowering. So I had there's a clump of Salvia sylvestris that's growing over by the sun garden, and you can see, so there's still a couple of flowers left on this one, but for the most part about 60% of it is done. And this is kind of my guide. Whenever I see about 60 or 70% no flowers, I go ahead and cut it back. And the best way, especially with these types, to do that is to find a node, and a node is, and I'm going to set this down and hopefully not knock it over. So this is what a node is. It's where the stem kind of comes out and the leaves come out, and that's what it's opposite. You're going to cut your plant just above that. And if you can see in there, there's a little leaf down in there and a little leaf down in there, and those are new buds. And what will happen is the buds will break and more flowers will come out. And especially these newer varieties, if we are good and on top of cutting our flowers back, we can get 2 or 3 flowering flushes out of them. And they flush very quickly. They kind of look a little awkward after you cut them back, especially these guys here. But once they're done, I mean, they just puff right back up.
Flowers that flush out, are they as beautiful as
yes.
Sometimes they're a little less.
I don't know. I find with the newer ones that we've come out with from Walters, they definitely reflush to kind of their original grandeur. We do fertilize our beds once a year, once every 2 years, and they're heavy feeders in most cases. So especially these new garden varieties. Now we do have several species. So the Salvia greggii, the Salvia macrophylla, the Salvia hot lips types that are very popular. Those come from the southwestern North America and grow in the desert and definitely prefer more of a well drain. There's also this Salvia chamaedryoides, which I really like. Has that really beautiful blue flower. And they're more shrubby types. So whenever a salvia has a woody stem, they have a completely different type of management. So we grow a lot of ours in these raised bed situations where there's really good drainage, full sun, but they do have this sprawling thing that they do, which we have to manage. So I'm going to show you guys somewhere where we have to do a little bit of work. So Salvia microphylla, forever red. It is one of our red greggii microphylla types. And this is the main plant. If you look back in here, you can see kind of our sticks, and thankfully the new flush of growth kind of hides that. But we also have this random branch that's kind of come down here, and we have a random plant over there, and that's not a seedling. That is actually where the branch laid down and rooted in, because with these shrubby ones, they will get rather large. This plant was actually taller than that opuntia. It completely ate that agave. It was all the way over there and all the way out here at the end of the summer. And we had to probably cut it back like 1 or 2 times last year just to kind of keep it close to the bed and stop it from eating its neighbors. And so what we'll do is we will actually cut this. I'm just going to cut this off near the main stem. I don't have to cut the whole thing off. And if I'm good, see, I pull the plant up and there's still a piece left. So I'll just pull.
So fairly easy to propagate.
Totally easy to propagate. So obviously if you have a friend who's got some layering, is super easy. It takes like no time whatsoever, but you can also take a cutting. So I asked our horticulture manager, Dr. Patrick McMillan, about what he would say during a salvia talk, and he told me the story about where salvia hot lips came from, which is a super popular variety. And apparently there was a dinner party that was happening, and with a bunch of horticulturists, and the maid was from the area, from Tijuana, and she had gone out around her house and picked a bunch of flowers and made these arrangements for the dinner guests, and salvia hot lips was in the vases, and everybody was like, oh my goodness, what is this, what is this? And so the gentleman who was hosting the dinner party got credit for it, but it was really the maid who had discovered it out in the wild, picking flowers for the vases. Yep.
So would it root in water?
It would root in water, but it wouldn't transplant well.
Did you get the credit back to you?
Nope. Patrick did. And now I did. But yep, so the Tijuanan maid discovered a plant out in the wild. But so that's salvias in a nutshell. There's more than 1,000 different species, and each one of those probably has dozens and dozens of cultivars, because they are so diverse and they occur through all the different areas. So whenever they co-occur, a lot of times they'll hybridize as well. So you just get all this diversity even in these crazy places. So
why is it always the ones I covet are not for this setup?
I don't know. All of these are growing here, and they've been growing here really well. So that's what we're doing, is we are trying to find those really cool plants that you can grow here. So salvias for the garden. Huh?
Only full sun, low drain soil?
Nope. They grow in every type of soil, every type of light condition. There is a salvia for every spot.
I actually have my hot lips growing under pine trees.
Wow. It's a high shade.
Great.
Yep.
High shade, and it gets lots of pine litter and all of that, and it's great. It just blooms it's already started.
Hey, there you go.
So it's great.
Yeah, ours just started flowering in the garden.
They start out red.
Right, and then they fade and come in, and I feel like every time I've looked at it, like it actually becomes more bicolored, that white and red, as it gets warmer, for sure. So, salvias and diseases, not so much. Some of them will get some leaf spotting diseases, especially when they have kind of fleshier rugose leaves, and especially the ones that are from like Central Europe. We sometimes have problems with them where they don't like our humidity, and they'll kind of crash a little bit. But generally speaking, they're pretty tough, and you kind of have to, you do have to manage them. So we sell more than a dozen different salvias in the nursery, and there are 3 that are good for shades. So we sell glabrescens and koyamai. I love koyamai. It is a much better, well-behaved shade. Yep, it's the yellow one, and it's more well-behaved than glabrescens. Glabrescens can be pretty sprawly and wandery, but thankfully that's still easy to pull up, just like just like that one was. So I've sent that one home with volunteers before. But some of the other ones that we sell, so like we were talking earlier about Salvia garantica, black and blue. Salvia garantica can be a bit of a thug, and it does run through underground rhizomes. And there are a couple places where we've had to cut it and treat it with chemical, just to slow it down and keep it out of its neighbors. Another one that I do warn people about that looks so beautiful, it is a beautiful plant, don't get me wrong, is Salvia madrensis, redneck girl. That is an enormous plant. I mean, it's like it can get up to 8 to 10 feet tall in an ideal situation. And it flowers very late in the year, like almost just before frost. So most people, I get a lot of emails like in October, like, why has my Salvia redneck girl not flowered? And it's like, well, it's probably about to. But it will either get too big for most people because they're just not expecting it to really get that big in one season, and it does kind of run once it gets happy where it is. So you kind of have to be ready for that where you put it. But it has huge, tall, yellow panicles, and the stems can be kind of this red burgundy color. So it's really hard to beat that color combo, especially so late in the year when everything's starting to kind of go down a little bit. Oh yeah, just have to, right plant, right place, which I think is why, just gardeners in general have loved salvia so much, is because there is a plant for every type of garden spot. So
Where is it that he's one in the garden?
the Salvia madrensis, redneck girl, it's in Tony's yard. So you'd have to, during the, not open yet, but we are going to have a fundraiser sometime this summer. So you can come see it whenever we have the fundraiser. That's all I've got today. Does anybody else have any more questions?
What about the culinary uses?
Ooh, culinary use. I didn't even talk about that. Well, I did mention, so Salvia divinorum, which is the drug, the hallucinatory drug that's from Central America. But yeah, so rosemary, if you consider it a salvia, I won't argue with anybody about that. I don't really care. Rosemary is very tasty, but they have a lot of chemicals in them. Each of them smells a little different. I'm standing here right now, I'm kind of giving myself a slight headache because it's just very odoriferous, but you really do have to be careful about which salvias you use. So Salvia officinalis is the common garden cooking sage, and that one is good, but you definitely need to be familiar with the species, because there are some chemicals like in Salvia divinorum that will mess with your brain or make you sick. But there is a lot of like edible uses for them, and different places in the world use different salvias for different things. I've had it like in random like dishes, not even realizing that oh this is a salvia leaf, but it's not like Salvia officinalis, the cooking sage.
Do you use the flowers? Just leave, right?
Just the leaves. Yep. No. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.